was just like, holy shit, it's light. Why does no one else know about this? Like,
I used this red light therapy box every day for 3 months, and here are the results. So I went down the rabbit hole of reading about red light therapy. I did a full blood panel and I used it daily to see what the results would be on me. We also got some input from Daniel Ebbett, who has dedicated his life to this stuff. So, that's heavy. So I'm going to cover what is red light therapy, including expert input from Dan about his journey and how he came to solve his own problem. What are the documented clinical effects? And what were my results? What was the impact on my blood tests, my sleep, my recovery, my muscle gain, my mood, and my performance? I'm also going to cover specifically what it did to my testosterone in this video because there's a lot more to say on that. Also, we'll cover recommendations for if you want to get a red light therapy box yourself and what to look out for, and some further reading. So what is red light therapy? It's using therapeutic wavelengths of visible and non-visible light onto the skin to produce effects in humans. So using a box like this to produce visible and non-visible, you'll have to trust me on that one, forms of light. I know it sounds wacky that shining red light on your body is going to have some kind of physiological effect, but doctors are no stranger to this. And I was lucky enough to work on a dermatology department in a large hospital where my supervisor was a specialist in phototherapy. So that is using targeted wavelengths of light on severe skin conditions, and they saw dramatic improvements. If you've seen our other videos, you'll know that light is biologically active, and dysregulation of normal sunlight to our bodies can predispose us to a variety of poor function in terms of sleep and stress, and to a variety of chronic diseases. Over to Dan.
we're wired from a biological standpoint to be awake under blue light, so your cortisol levels come up, and what's supposed to happen is when the sun sets, blue light's supposed to go away, and that's a trigger for you to release melatonin. But obviously that gets suppressed, so your cortisol remains elevated chronically, your melatonin stays bottomed out, and you don't sleep. And that was essentially the situation I was in. So ordered in some safety glasses that blocked 99% of blue light. Just give it a try, and within a week I was like, holy shit, that's it. Like I've found the issue here.
Here's a quick 101 primer on the 5 types of bioactive light. So first we've got blue light. This is what sets the circadian rhythm in our brain. It triggers all the downstream neurotransmitters and hormones involved in the sleep-wake cycle. So I cover that in more detail here on the blue light blocking lenses video, and that's exactly why I look ridiculous from 9 p.m. onwards. You could argue I look ridiculous before 9 p.m. as well, but next we've got UV light. So this is ultraviolet. It allows us to synthesize vitamin D from the sun. That's usually the one that most people know about. Then we've got far infrared. So this acts to heat up our cells, and it's the part of the sun spectrum that you feel as heat from the sun. Far infrared light stimulates changes in our cell function, which I'll cover in a moment. Next, we've got red light, which stimulates the mitochondria to produce more energy in the cells, and I'll cover why that's important in a second. And we've got near infrared light, so that acts on the same kind of pathways as red light. You might be thinking, okay, but how is this relevant to me performing better, feeling better, looking better? Well, there's a few broad principles that you should be aware of. The first one is hormesis. That's the principle of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or supercompensation. So exercise or fasting or being exposed to a virus. Generally, some stimulus comes along, it makes you temporarily weaker, your body adapts, gets stronger, and then you can perform better the next time you're exposed to that. Now, this is really cool from a performance enhancing perspective, because there's a few hacks like lifting weights, which I think everyone should do, which produces this kind of effect. But some of the shortcuts produce the opposite. The opposite of hormesis might be something that causes a short-term boost in performance, but a long-term negative adaptation. So for example, taking anabolic steroids is going to make you stronger in the short term, but there's endocrine disruption, there's negative feedback, and therefore you might end up hypogonadal when you come off the steroids. So that's not a very good strategy. Other examples, so what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but if it does kill you, so that's an insult beyond the body's capacity to recover. I also cover endocrine disruption, which I think kind of comes under this, and that's in this video where I talk about environmental estrogens generally impacting our cognition, our cancer risk, and our performance and body composition and all of that. But I won't get on my soapbox today about that. The reason I'm mentioning that is that red light therapy is in the good boys box. So it acts as an exercise mimetic. What it does is it produces a low-level inflammatory and free radical response in the body, and the body then becomes more tolerant to cellular stresses in the future. So similar to how exercise makes us healthier, because there's a metabolic stress, increase in free radicals, and your body becomes better at dealing with that in the future. One of my concerns before using it was that there would be some kind of negative feedback effect from adding in something a bit like supplementing with melatonin tablets. And then when you withdraw it, what you're noticing from stopping it is the withdrawal effect and reduction in function. But actually, the thing I'm quite pleased about and settled with red light therapy is that the downstream mechanisms from it, the induction of oxidative stress and the mitochondrial stimulation, are really exercise mimetics. And they are, what the red light therapy is actually doing is causing a stress to your body, and the benefit that you get is the response to that stress. And so there's not really, from my understanding, there's not really a risk of stopping it and worsening your function, because you're actually equipping your body to get stronger and to produce what it needs to produce.
Obviously, there's too much of a good thing. Whether someone sits there and spends 8 hours a day in front of a panel, probably not the best thing to do. But in general, yeah, if it's almost just that small consistent dose of it just keeps your mitochondria functioning the way they should be.
The key principle is as long as the body can recover from it, and that's why the dose is important, which I'll cover at the end. So can you be deficient in red light? The answer is yes. So you can get too much of the wrong light, so malillumination, artificial light exposure at night, things like electronic devices and TV and computers and so on. They're linked with numerous diseases, so a lot of them are kind of downstream from dysregulating the sleep-wake cycle. Sunlight deficiency in general has been linked with neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, MS, Parkinson's, lots of types of cancer, obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, depression. It's pretty multi-system. But what you would more likely notice in the short term of excess blue light or not enough sunlight is mood disorders, SAD, and fat gain and increased cravings. So all of these downstream from not sleeping enough.
Essentially, when you look at a spectrum of light, and was a very big aha moment for me as well, was you've got blue light down one end of the spectrum, which is the very short, narrow wavelengths, which are very powerful and strong and can penetrate, and they kind of break down. So like blue light on the skin will cause damage to the skin over time if it's isolated by itself. Red light is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. It's a longer wavelength. It's a more healing wavelength. So when you go out in nature, it's balanced, right? Everything's balanced. So like blue light is like the damaging wavelength, red light is like the healing wavelength. You put it together, it's like nature's antidote, and it's all in balance. The issue we've got is we're like so out of balance that we get all this blue light with no red constantly day in, day out. So like red light therapy is like the balancing of that, trying to like bring enough red light back into your environment to balance it all out, because you're just constantly getting the breakdown and the damage from blue light and none of the healing from the red light. The simple answer, which some people say, is, well, you just go outside more, you just need to get more sun. But ultimately, is that practical in today's world? I would love to spend 8 hours a day outside, but we've all got to earn a living. Most of us have got to work inside, so it's kind of now, how can you utilize technology in good ways to counteract that indoor lifestyle?
This Swedish study looked at 30,000 women for 20 years, quite a rare study, and found that those with the lowest sun exposure had a twofold higher rate of death compared to women with the most sun exposure. Just all-cause mortality. This isn't biohacking. And I frivolously used the word biohacking at the start, but I really think that it's the other way around. I think what we're doing in modern life is the hacking, but in a negative context. We are the ones who have made all these screens and monitors and shut ourselves off from daylight day to day, and we've pulled out these specific harmful wavelengths of light and restricted ourselves from the helpful ones, and we've created a deficiency in ourselves. And as you say, it's not practical to just say, oh, let's just return to nature. I was spending 60, 70 hours in a hospital per week where there's no windows and it's blue lights, and obviously terrible for the patients as well. But you're thinking, how do you then find time to try and counteract that? So I very much do see it as you do, which is we're correcting a deficiency rather than adding in a new kind of biohack to take the body into some kind of super physiological state. I find it really satisfying with the patient as well if they have a clear deficiency in something and you correct it and you see all the other markers just improve because the body can finally operate as it's supposed to.
Yeah, essentially just trying to bring things back to neutral.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't involve going back to caveman days and living it. It's more, how do we reset to neutral in the 21st century in a practical way? Some low-hanging fruit, like people don't have to go out and buy one of these expensive devices. Certainly, like I said, it is something that can aid our modern lifestyles or it can aid recovery from chronic conditions. But low-hanging fruit is get outside. If you can, everyone's got it's prioritizing and finding time. I'm not saying go and spend 8 hours outside, but like one of the key things is when you get up in the morning, get exposure to natural light, even if it's 5 minutes. It's whatever you can do, because that really, first of all, that first morning light that you get is anchoring your circadian rhythm. So it's taking in the blue light from the sun, and in the morning it's particularly important because there's higher levels of red and the infrared light in the morning, because that's why we've got the red hues in the sun. Then throughout the day, it's if you can get outside at lunchtime, just morning tea breaks, get outside and get some sun, because again, it's the changing of the frequencies of light in the environment. It's like you're checking in with it's keeping your body clock in check with the actual time of the day. So those are really, that's an easy low-hanging fruit that doesn't cost anything. If people go outside for smoke breaks, well, why can't you go outside for a light break? So that would be number one, because it's free. And then from there, it's about looking at how you can incorporate more of the beneficial light and remove more of the what I would call harmful light. Some people would get a set of glasses and they would follow our sort of the night protocol of wearing them. And they come back to us and say, look, it hasn't helped with my sleep. And then the question sort of gets raised is, what are you doing during the daytime? Like, are you getting outside? Are you getting natural light, or are you getting any sunlight? And pretty much every time that there's been an issue, it hasn't worked in the evening. It's no, they're in the office all day and then they're just coming home sort of thing, and they're not actually getting outside. And then when you actually look at the research on that, and what's happening is the near infrared light that you get from the sun, and the blue light and the full spectrum of light interacting with your skin and eyes is actually stimulating serotonin. And serotonin then, in the absence of blue light at night, converts to melatonin. So if you block all the blue light at night, but you have low serotonin, you don't have any raw material to make the melatonin. So it's kind of like, you got to get into the details on that. So I'm like, it's almost more important what you do during the day to what you do at night, but you ultimately need to do both things together to get the result.
That's an important point, that you're actually preparing for sleep during the day by building the precursors, and that something like blue light lenses, and this is what I love about speaking to you, Dan, because you're not just a kind of fanatical salesman of these products and being like, oh yeah, they're going to fix all your problems, which is one of the big signs of a biohacking guru. And instead, you're like, it's going to stack the deck in your favor, but you've still got to do the basics. There's a few other mechanisms why this works so well. So remember the mitochondria from biology, so the powerhouse of the cell. Every cell has mitochondria, and if you improve the size and strength of those, then theoretically any cell in the body is going to perform better. So you're generally leveling up. It's also possible that red light reduces the viscosity of the fluid in the cell, so it makes the water thinner, which means the mitochondria have less friction to operate against. Next one, and this is wild, there are cellular mechanisms that cause our body to interact with chlorophyll. The idea is that we eat plants, the chlorophyll is sequestered into our tissues, and that we have chlorophyll-mediated photosynthetic mechanisms in our bodies because of that. So this suggests that animals and humans have metabolic pathways to derive energy directly from sunlight. Never thought I'd be saying that in a video. Mechanism number 4 is that red light stimulates serotonin and melatonin synthesis in the mitochondria. So local production of melatonin. And we'll talk about why it's such a cool hormone, but it's so much more than just sleep. This is because the mitochondria produces melatonin directly, and it has daytime effects as well as nighttime effects. The main thing is that melatonin is a powerful antioxidant, so it neutralizes the product of the electron transport chain, which is the byproduct of metabolism, the oxidative stress. I didn't realize this, but 95% of the body's melatonin is produced in the mitochondria, not in the pineal gland. So it's locally consumed by the mitochondria, and that's why there's a difference between blood level melatonin and mitochondrial melatonin. Final mechanism I'll cover here, there's probably loads to be discovered, but red light can displace nitric oxide in the cells, which causes you to vasodilate, which lowers your blood pressure, a possible mechanism for lower cardiovascular disease in countries that have more sunlight. Okay, so there's the mechanisms, and if you're still with me, you might be thinking, okay, well, what's the clinical effect now? Well, what I love is that because of how global that effect is, the clinical effects are really wide-ranging as well. So briefly, we've got skin health, improving the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles and blemishes, enhancing collagen synthesis. We've got improvements in muscle recovery and physical performance. And interestingly, compared to ice baths, which if you've seen our video on ice baths here, then you'll know that ice baths are great for dampening inflammation in the short term and short-term improvements in performance, but they interfere with the mechanisms for hypertrophy, so they hinder exercise recovery. Red light therapy doesn't do that. You get the best of both worlds, and it can amplify rather than hinder the adaptations to exercise. We've seen improvements in anxiety and depression, fat loss in a calorie deficit, improvements in insulin sensitivity, reversing hair loss by increasing the diameter of hair strands, improving cellulite, cognitive function, sleep quality in Dan's case here.
So that was another factor that just boosted my sleep even more. Through tracking through the Oura ring and whatnot, saw a direct increase again in my deep sleep levels from just the introduction of more of the near-infrared light.
More improvements from the data, so chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis. So Dan had improvements in his pain.
After my years in the gym as well, I had quite a beaten up hip and lower back and quite a bit of pain. It significantly helped with that, and the reduction is simply, I think I was just inflamed systemically inflamed over the whole body. So I saw a significant reduction there in pain.
One more thing to add is I broke my toe on the day that I recorded that video, and it's now day 4 or 5, and I've been shining red light on my toe, obviously. And for what it's worth, I'm more able to weight bear now. The pain isn't as bad. So take from that what you want to. Maybe with a pinch of salt and a dash of pepper. Even more improvements from the data, so reduction in gum inflammation and gingivitis, increase in recovery from injuries, both musculoskeletal and wound healing. There's improvements in insomnia. There's also the sexy part, testosterone, that the hypothesis is that if you can improve mitochondrial function in the Leydig cells, which is the testosterone secreting cells in the balls, that by shining red light on them, you can improve your testosterone function. So I have a separate video on that on my OnlyFans, on our YouTube channel, which covers that in more detail because there's a lot more to say on that. Finally, and this one blew my mind, improvement in thyroid function in patients who were clinically hypothyroid and were using thyroxine. This study shows that after 10 sessions of light therapy on the thyroid, 97% of them normalized their thyroid levels, didn't need as much thyroxine, some were able to come off entirely, and those effects were sustained after a year in follow-up. There's also reports of people improving their general energy levels. Over to Dan once again.
More over the long term for me, it's been, because I guess for me when I stopped using it is when I noticed the differences. I noticed it helps certainly with sustained energy for me. The afternoon slump is significantly less when I've done a morning treatment. When I look at the reasons why and you look at what the red light therapy is doing, is it's interacting with your mitochondria. That essentially is the organelles, the energy power plants of the cells in the body. So essentially that helps you create more energy. If you can stimulate your mitochondria through the use of light and it can use oxygen more efficiently, it's going to allow you to produce more ATP, and which is ATP is essentially what all your cells use and your muscles use for energy. So if you can help your cells function better at the cell layer, your whole body's going to function better.
So these effects are insane. Why is nobody talking about this?
I guess the issue with it, controversially, is there much profit in it? If I sell someone a red light panel and it helps resolve a lot of chronic disease, not a great not a great profit maker out of it. So yeah, like look, obviously it's never. I think it's one of those things that will never make it into the mainstream because of that. You're up against the pharmaceutical industry with it essentially. When you look at the research on what it can do in terms of the range of chronic conditions it can help with, I'm not saying it can magically heal everything, but ultimately, if you understand how it works, and that's why the studies range so massively, because it's designed to help with this one condition. It's ultimately designed to help the body function the way it's supposed to function and therefore heal itself.
Making 200 quid profit one off as a device that then doesn't need repeat customers, then it's not a very attractive prospect compared to lifetime drug therapy. I think the answer is probably that there's multiple mechanisms, but it's great that this world is gaining traction, and it just takes looking at who's funding the studies as a useful marker as well. Okay, so onto my results. I took 2 wide panel blood tests 3 months apart. In between, I did red light therapy for about 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week. I tried to hold everything steady with the blood tests, so they were fasted at 9 a.m. I trained the night before, generally similar fed state. I thought I'd be a good candidate for this because I was working long hours in a hospital where there's very little sunlight, and then when I'm doing propane stuff at home, I am a professional goblin and don't get much sunlight either. So I was likely to be deficient. So let's talk through the blood tests here. Generally, pretty unexciting, I'm afraid. So B12 was about the same, it went from normal to normal. ALT, liver function, fine. Albumin, very unexciting. Cortisol, normal to normal. CRP, so this is a marker of inflammation, went down very slightly. And this is expected from red light exposure. However, it went from 1.2 to 0.5. These are both very low values, and it's unlikely that we'd be able to say much about an effect size just from that. So ferritin was bang on the same. Folate, all pretty normal. Free testosterone, oh, you'll have to see my other video for that one. Gamma GT, globulin, all normal. My blood glucose, exactly the same, so bang in the middle. Cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, all normal. Magnesium, so I was supplementing with magnesium, and I think I was just probably taking a bit too much. It just pushed me slightly into the above the normal range. Sex hormone binding globulin and total testosterone. You'll also have to see the other video for that. My thyroid, again, normal to normal. So really, looking through these, vitamin D, T3, in summary, my blood tests were very unexciting. Was there much of a change? No. Am I disappointed? No. In fact, I'd be concerned if there was a significant shift in my blood results. So I'd be thinking, whoa, this is pretty powerful stuff here. The only thing that did seem to move in the right direction, as I say, is the CRP. But I don't think that I can attribute that improvement to the red light therapy. The mechanism does stack up though. So red light therapy can kind of irradiate your blood and improve your inflammatory markers that way too. So the blood results were unexciting, but how did I feel? Well, I was definitely more sleepy in the evenings when I used it in the evenings. I had an acute mood improvement, so after using it, I'd usually feel pretty good for the rest of the day, particularly the next 2 to 3 hours. Recovery-wise, I had slightly less muscle soreness in general, but I was eating a calorie surplus. I was living quite a low-stress life after quitting my hospital job. I didn't get COVID during those 3 months, so some people might be like, oh, well, maybe it prevents COVID. Well, I didn't get attacked by an elephant during that time either, so maybe it prevents elephant attacks too. So, in general, I felt broadly better, but there was nothing dramatic, no fireworks. And again, I'm not concerned about that. I didn't deeply quantify things like my HRV, my heart rate variability. I think if I was going to, something like a circle ring would be a great way to do that, if it'll go in focus. There we are. This measures sleep, blood pressure, oxygen sats, all that stuff. So you can get quite a nice panel of information. I have to admit, I didn't do it because I'm not great with statistics and I wouldn't have been able to make much sense of the data anyway. My other cop-out excuse for the lack of statistics is that there's thousands of variables at play, and I don't think one person doing a study shining red light on himself in his bedroom is necessarily going to come out with any major conclusions. It's the same as looking at the data on creatine or protein or lifting weights, that it's not going to be sudden dramatic improvements, it's long-term benefits, and you've just got to take science's word for it. So my approach on this stuff is be guided by the science, but focus on your inputs. If by this point you're convinced of the benefits of red light therapy, then keep watching. If not, I've got some further reading for you at the end, but here are my recommendations. So the protocol that I used personally was 4 to 5 times a week for 10 minutes at a time. Depending on the tissues that you're treating and the result that you want, that'll determine how far from the box you want to sit, whether you want to use red light or infrared, whether you want to do it for short times or long times, or if you want big coverage of your skin or just to treat a specific area. For example, if you're doing it for muscle recovery or hair loss or brain function, there'll be different protocols for that. And there's a book by Ari Whitten which covers this in excruciating detail. So you can have a look at that if you're interested in figuring out your own protocol.
The way ultimately you should be using a well-designed panel, you should be sitting around 3 to 6 inches from it. There'll be a very high radiance or peak power at that distance, and it's not something that you just put on in the room and it's like an ambient light. Now, how does that compare to the sun? You're taking a lot more concentrated dosage than you're getting from the sun, and that's why it can have such a powerful therapeutic effect, because you're essentially isolating very specific frequencies of red and near infrared that have a whole bunch of research behind them. In terms of timing, you only need to spend like 10 minutes in front of a good device a day, or per area. So if you've got a full body panel, for example, this is kind of how I set things up. It's 10 minutes on the front, turn around 10 minutes on the back. What we see, especially with customers, is that are using, and the feedback is the key is consistency with it. And that's kind of where I've got a little bit of a problem with these red light therapy clinics, right? Because you'll go in and you'll spend $80 for a red light therapy session. It may be on a bed or some panels, and you might do that once a week. Even then, I don't know, like at $80 a session, you might just fork that out. But it's not like you're going to use it after one session and go, holy shit, like I'm healed and everything's back to normal. There certainly are some people that are like their mitochondria is not functioning well at all, and they will get literally an energy boost from it. It's, holy shit, I've been so deficient in this. But for most people, it's going to be like, you know what, like after a month, you're just like, oh, like I'm feeling better, and like my pain's gone and stuff.
It's a no-brainer when you compare $80 sessions and what you go 4 times, 5 times, and then that's paid for the just buying a box. So if we treat it like exercise, as an exercise mimetic, then we've got to treat it in a similar way, that you've got to do it consistently. If you do too much, you do twice as much exercise, you're not going to make twice the gains, because it's about creating a stimulus and then allowing the response to happen. So I think approaching it like that, and also even in terms of the size of the body area, that if you're doing full body, you can't tolerate as much of a stimulus compared to if you're doing a specific body part. You can train that a little bit more often and still recover from it, but still within reason. My main recommendation is make sure you pick the right device. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. So if a company doesn't have specific information about the wavelengths and the power and so on, that's a real red flag. You mentioned that there are a lot of devices on the market that either don't isolate the correct frequencies or are ridiculously underpowered and won't get the result that they're supposed to. Can you talk to us about that?
So with something that sort of gains a little bit of traction in the health community, then a lot of copycats come out with all sorts of different devices, and most of them really just don't have any backing of research behind them. They've gone to China and just picked whatever's off the shelf, and they're just labeling it red light therapy and selling it. And that creates a lot of confusion out there. We get people that are just overwhelmed by all these different devices and all sorts. There was probably one company offering them at that point in time, and some things didn't even stack up then when I was kind of looking at the research, and because what was in the research and what's been done in academic studies and what's available to the public as a device were very different things. They've got medical grade devices that have actually been created for these studies versus essentially LED grow lights as a repurposed grow lights. And when you looked at what they were emitting in terms of power and irradiance and wavelengths, great for growing plants, but are they actually going to align to what's in the academic journals here? And they're using tiny little diodes that they may or may not be the right frequencies. I haven't gone that far to even look at that, because I can just tell you straight away they're just not producing near enough power out of them. They'll be using probably 0.2 watt LEDs. So just to put that in perspective, we use 5 watt LEDs. Really, it's just not going to have that irradiance. So irradiance is the measurement of light energy. They'll be far too weak. They won't penetrate into the tissue enough. The next thing is wavelengths. So there's two issues with out there. So first of all, it's just completely incorrect wavelengths. So they might just be just generic red light without actually narrowing down to certain frequencies.
As you say, you've got to first give it the sense check and say, this is supposed to replicate the power of the sun. So a USB charging or little batteries are probably not going to do the trick. You've said that you kind of select the wavelengths and the power based on the evidence. How does that kind of then translate into manufacturing the devices?
Right, cool, yes. So happy to be pretty transparent here, and 100% of red light therapy devices will be manufactured in China. That is the way the world is. There's no manufacturing facilities that would be able to do them outside of there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but obviously that it makes it a low barrier to entry for a dropshipper to come up and just jump on Alibaba or start selling them. So we've established relationships with our manufacturer over the years, and what we've done is internally we understand what we want to create. So we don't just take something off the shelf. We've sat down and said, this is what we want to achieve. So we work with their lighting engineering team and go, we want to achieve this. And so they go away and create that. So essentially we've got, in terms of a checklist of what we want, so it's the first thing is the wavelengths, which we've discussed. The next thing is flicker. So it's a neurological stress on the brain, essentially, a flickering light. And it's actually going to stress the body out more. So flicker's a big one, and that comes down to the manufacturing and the use of the componentry inside it. So you can cut corners and drivers in it, and it will look fine. It will still fire up, and you'll think you've got a great device, but it's got flicker in it. So we've got a thing like this, which is a light spectrometer, so I can actually validate the wavelengths that are coming off each bit manufacturing run, I'll do this is obviously, that's coming off my screen at the moment. It's probably not going to focus, but pretty much we can validate that, and we can validate the irradiance with this as well. So this is an expensive light spectrometer, and so we do that. The other thing we look at as well is EMFs. So it's a big problem with a high-powered electrical device that you're standing 3 inches in front of. A lot of electricity running through them, so you've got things like electric fields and magnetic fields that come off them, and a poorly created device will be emitting extreme levels well beyond what's deemed safe. Did you actually provide benefit to the body, or did you put it in more harm? So again, we have another meter we do, and we check and test every batch to make sure the EMF levels are safe.
One other question is this the same as using a sauna or an infrared sauna? It's not, it's different wavelengths, but I do think there are some good benefits to sauna in general. I cover it in this video too. I've done a video on everything. This is the box that Dan gave me. It's got multiple settings, as you can see here, so you can set quite easily to red or just infrared. And it's just very easy to use. It's pretty powerful. It's quite wide, so you can treat big areas of your body at one time. I would recommend something like this rather than a tiny one, because otherwise you'll just be at it for hours. It's got built-in fans. You might be able to hear that because it's so powerful. So using that, you can adjust the settings, the wavelengths, and how far or close you want to sit to it, depending on the depth of the tissues that you're treating. Another question is, how is this different from laser therapy? So laser therapy is just the difference in the coherence of the beams. It's more concentrated, but the wavelength is the same. So I would recommend not wasting your money with laser. The red light box is pretty much the Swiss Army knife. So don't waste your money with a cheap product, and make sure that the quality is always up to standard. And you can use discount code PROPANE for 10% off. Amazing. Dan, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, nice to talk. And yeah, also if anyone wants to reach out, questions, we love them, fire them through and we're happy to answer them.
Okay, discount code PROPANE for 10% off. It's an investment and it'll last you for absolutely years. And here is the video on how red light therapy impacted my testosterone.